This story is titled, My Stepmother Tried to Steal My Inheritance by Claiming I Was Never Legally Adopted, so I revealed the secret letter my dad left me. Growing up in suburban Portland, Oregon, I, 23F, never really fit the picture-perfect family dynamic that my stepmother Lisa, 42F, tried so desperately to create. My biological mother Emily passed away when I was just 2 years old from complications during surgery, leaving my father Robert to raise me alone. He did an amazing job. We were incredibly close, and he made sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything despite our loss. Everything changed when I was 7, and Dad met Lisa at a local charity event. She seemed nice enough at first, always bringing me small gifts and taking genuine interest in my hobbies. She had her own daughter, Madeline, 25F, from a previous marriage, who was 2 years older than me. Within a year, Dad and Lisa were married, and we all moved into a beautiful Victorian house in the historic district. Dad officially adopted Madeline, and Lisa adopted me. At least, that's what I was always told. Looking back now, I should have noticed the subtle signs of Lisa's true nature. How she would lavish attention on Madeline while only maintaining a polite facade with me when Dad was around. How family photos would mysteriously go missing if they showed just Dad and me from before Lisa entered our lives. But Dad was happy, and that was all that mattered to me. I learned to navigate life with a stepmother who merely tolerated my existence and a stepsister who treated me with cold indifference. Dad built a successful construction company from the ground up, and we lived comfortably. He always emphasized the importance of education and hard work, setting aside money for both Madeline's and my college funds. Despite Lisa's attempts to create distance between us, Dad and I maintained our close bond. Every Sunday was our special day. We'd go hiking in Forest Park, grab breakfast at our favorite diner, and talk about everything and nothing. Those moments were my anchor, keeping me grounded through the subtle tension at home. The stability I had grown accustomed to shattered 6 months ago, when Dad suffered a sudden heart attack while overseeing a project at work. He was only 45. The world I knew crumbled around me as I watched them lower his casket into the ground, with Lisa's perfectly manicured hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting. I had no idea then that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would force me to uncover family secrets I never knew existed, and fight for what was rightfully mine against the woman who was supposed to be my second mother. The first hint that something was seriously wrong came during the reading of Dad's will at our family lawyer's office. Mr. Thompson, 61M, who had handled our family's legal matters for over 2 decades, seemed unusually tense that morning. Lisa sat beside me, wearing a conservative black dress and clutching her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. Madeline stayed home, claiming she was too grief-stricken to attend, though I had seen her browsing vacation destinations on her laptop the night before. The contents of the will shocked everyone in the room. Dad had left 70% of his company's shares and assets to me, with the remaining 30% split between Lisa and Madeline. His decision made sense. I had been working alongside him at the company for the past 2 years since graduating college, learning every aspect of the business, while Madeline showed zero interest in the family enterprise. The house would remain in Lisa's name, but a substantial trust fund had been set up for me, accessible when I turned 25, or if I decided to pursue an MBA, whichever came first. Lisa's reaction was immediate and disturbing. Her perfectly maintained composure cracked, and her face contorted with barely concealed rage. She started rifling through her bag, pulling out a thick folder of documents I had never seen before. Her hands were shaking as she passed them to Mr. Thompson, but there was a calculated gleam in her eyes that made my blood run cold. According to Lisa, my adoption had never been properly finalized. She claimed there was a crucial error in the paperwork filed 15 years ago, rendering the entire process invalid. She argued that since I wasn't legally Robert's daughter, I had no right to inherit anything beyond what would go to a non-family employee. The documents she presented appeared official, complete with courthouse stamps and notary seals. Mr. Thompson looked deeply troubled as he examined the papers. The possibility that my entire legal connection to the man who raised me could be nullified by a technicality made me feel physically ill. Lisa's smug expression as she watched me process this information confirmed what I had always suspected. She had been playing a long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What Lisa didn't know was that Dad had always been 2 steps ahead of everyone else. He must have suspected something like this might happen, because he had left something crucial behind, something that would turn her carefully constructed plan completely upside down. But at that moment, sitting in that oppressive office with my world falling apart around me, I had no idea that the key to fighting back was waiting for me in the most unexpected place. That evening, I returned to my small apartment in the Pearl District, feeling completely drained. I had moved out of the family home 2 months after Dad's passing, unable to bear Lisa's increasingly hostile attitude and Madeline's cold shoulder. My mind kept replaying the events at the lawyer's office, trying to make sense of how my adoption could possibly be invalid after all these years. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from Lisa, alternating between thinly veiled threats and manipulative attempts at reconciliation. She suggested we could work something out if I agreed to sign over the majority of my inheritance to Madeline, claiming it would be what your father would have wanted. The irony of her suddenly acknowledging Dad, as my father, wasn't lost on me. Exhausted and emotional, I began the painful process of going through Dad's personal items that I'd brought with me when I moved out. There wasn't much: his favorite Portland Trail Blazers cap, some old photos, and a worn leather briefcase he used during his early days of starting the company. I had been avoiding looking through these things, but something about today's events compelled me to face these memories. The briefcase still smelled like his aftershave, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were mostly old business papers and receipts, but tucked into a hidden compartment in the lining, I found an envelope I had never seen before. It was addressed to me in Dad's distinctive handwriting with a note: "Open only if Lisa ever challenges your place in this family." My heart pounding, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated just 3 months before his death, along with a stack of documents that made my breath catch in my throat. As I read through the contents, tears streamed down my face, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of gratitude for my father's foresight and love. The documents revealed that Dad had suspected Lisa's true nature years ago. He had discovered her attempting to manipulate family documents not long after their marriage, but chose to keep this knowledge to himself while quietly taking steps to protect me. The letter explained how he had secretly filed additional adoption paperwork in multiple jurisdictions, ensuring there could be no legal loopholes for Lisa to exploit. But more importantly, he had documented every instance of Lisa's attempts to interfere with my inheritance rights over the years, including conversations she thought were private. The most damning evidence was a series of emails between Lisa and a questionable legal consultant from 2 years ago, discussing various ways to invalidate my adoption after Dad's death. She had been planning this betrayal for years, all while playing the role of devoted wife and stepmother. Dad had discovered her scheme and made sure to create an ironclad backup plan to protect me. I spent the entire night reviewing every document Dad had left behind. Among them was a business card for Andrea Mitchell, 58F, a senior partner at one of Portland's most prestigious law firms. A handwritten note from Dad explained that she was an old family friend who had helped him put these safeguards in place. He had already paid for her services in advance, ensuring I would have expert legal representation if needed. The next morning, I called in sick to work and met with Andrea at her downtown office. Her resemblance to Angela Bassett was striking, and her commanding presence immediately put me at ease. As she reviewed Dad's documents, her expression shifted from professional interest to barely contained anger. She explained that Lisa's claimed paperwork error was actually a deliberate manipulation. Someone had quietly altered dates on certain documents in the county records system. The changes were subtle but strategic, designed to cast doubt on the adoption's validity. What Lisa hadn't counted on was that Dad had filed the adoption papers in 3 different counties, a redundancy that was unusual but perfectly legal. Even if one set of documents was compromised, the others would stand. Andrea also pointed out that Lisa's own adoption of me, which she had conveniently forgotten to mention during the will reading, legally established me as Dad's daughter regardless of any supposed issues with his adoption of me. But the most shocking revelation came when Andrea dug deeper into the emails Dad had discovered. It turned out that Lisa had attempted the same scheme before, with her previous marriage. Her first husband's family had quietly settled with her to avoid a scandal, which explained the sudden influx of money that had allowed her to maintain such an affluent lifestyle before meeting Dad. Andrea advised against confronting Lisa immediately. Instead, she helped me develop a strategic plan. We would let Lisa think she had the upper hand while we gathered additional evidence and prepared our legal response. The emails alone weren't enough. We needed to prove that the altered adoption documents were Lisa's doing. I returned to work the next day, playing the part of the devastated daughter who was considering Lisa's generous offer to negotiate. Meanwhile, Andrea's team began the meticulous process of building our case. Lisa's smug texts continued, each one now feeling like another piece of evidence falling into her laps. She had no idea that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down, or that her own daughter Madeline would soon play an unexpected role in her undoing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One evening, as I was leaving the office late, I found Madeline waiting by my car in the parking garage. She looked nothing like her usual polished self. Her eyes were red from crying, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. For a moment, we just stared at each other, years of forced politeness and barely concealed resentment hanging between us. Madeline broke down and confessed that she had discovered something disturbing in Lisa's home office while looking for some old tax documents. Hidden in a false bottom of Lisa's filing cabinet, she had found a folder containing detailed plans about the adoption challenge, dating back nearly 3 years. But what had really shaken Madeline was finding similar documents about her own adoption by my father, with notes suggesting Lisa had plans to use the same strategy to challenge Madeline's right to her share of the inheritance if she ever stepped out of line. The revelation hit Madeline hard. All these years, she had believed her mother's narrative about me being the interloper in their perfect family unit. Now she was faced with the truth that Lisa's maternal love was conditional, based entirely on how useful her daughters could be to her schemes. She admitted that Lisa had been pressuring her to support the challenge to my inheritance, promising her a larger share of the company if she helped discredit me. Madeline had brought copies of everything she found, including records of Lisa's consultations with various lawyers before Dad's death, seeking ways to invalidate both our adoptions. The documents revealed a pattern of calculated manipulation that made my blood run cold. Lisa had been playing an elaborate chess game with all of our lives, keeping Madeline and me at odds while positioning herself to take control of everything Dad had built. What struck me most was the realization that Madeline was as much a victim of Lisa's machinations as I was. Behind her seemingly privileged existence was a young woman who had spent her entire life trying to maintain her mother's approval, never feeling quite secure in her position. In that parking garage, something shifted between us. The artificial barrier Lisa had maintained between us for years began to crumble as we recognized our shared trauma. As we talked into the night at a quiet corner table in a nearby diner, Madeline and I began to piece together more of Lisa's deceptions. Each revelation brought us closer to understanding the full scope of her planned betrayal, and to forming an alliance that would have been unthinkable just days before. With Madeline's insider knowledge and my father's careful preparations, we finally had everything we needed to expose Lisa's true nature to the world. With Madeline's evidence in hand, Andrea's legal team worked quickly to build an airtight case. The next step was carefully orchestrated. We scheduled another meeting at Mr. Thompson's office, supposedly to discuss my acceptance of Lisa's terms. The anticipation made me sick to my stomach, but Madeline's steady presence helped keep me focused. That morning, Lisa arrived at the office looking immaculate as always, wearing an expensive cream-colored suit and a victorious smile. Her confidence was palpable as she sat down, placing her designer handbag carefully on the polished conference table. Madeline had warned me that Lisa had spent the previous evening celebrating with her friends, already counting the money she thought she'd secured. Mr. Thompson began by asking Lisa to formally present her evidence about the adoption irregularities. She launched into a well-rehearsed speech about discovering the procedural errors and how painful it was for her to bring this forward. Her performance was almost convincing, the concerned stepmother reluctantly revealing an unfortunate truth for the sake of justice. The turning point came when Andrea Mitchell walked into the room. Lisa's composure flickered for just a moment, but she quickly recovered, treating Andrea's presence as a minor inconvenience. That confidence lasted exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds. I know because I watched the clock on the wall as Andrea methodically dismantled Lisa's entire scheme. One by one, Andrea presented the documents Dad had preserved, the multiple valid adoption filings, and finally, the evidence Madeline had discovered. Lisa's face went through a remarkable transformation, as she realized her carefully constructed plan was unraveling. The moment Andrea pulled out the documents showing Lisa's attempts to manipulate both adoptions, including her own daughters, the color drained from her face. But the final blow came from Madeline herself. My stepsister stood up and calmly described finding the hidden documents, her voice steady as she detailed her mother's years of manipulation. Lisa's reaction was immediate and violent. She lunged for her handbag, probably reaching for her phone to call her lawyer, but knocked over her water glass instead. The spreading water stain on her expensive suit seemed to perfectly symbolize her dissolving facade of respectability. The aftermath of that meeting was swift and severe. Lisa's carefully crafted world crumbled around her in a matter of hours. Mr. Thompson immediately moved to secure all company assets, and Andrea filed emergency motions to protect both my and Madeline's interests. The evidence of Lisa's attempted fraud was so overwhelming that her own lawyer advised her to seek new representation. What followed was a flurry of legal activity that exposed even more of Lisa's deceptions. Bank records revealed that she had been siphoning small amounts from the company accounts for years, building a secret nest egg that she planned to access once she had control of everything. She had even begun making inquiries about selling the company assets, clearly planning to liquidate Dad's life's work as soon as she gained control. The most heartbreaking discovery came when we found Dad's original will from before his marriage to Lisa, stored in a safety deposit box at his bank. The accompanying letter explained that he had updated his will not out of trust in Lisa, but to protect Madeline, knowing that Lisa would likely try to challenge any inheritance that excluded her daughter. He had loved Madeline as his own, even while recognizing her mother's true nature. Lisa's response to being exposed was both predictable and pathetic. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming she had only been trying to protect the family's interests. When that didn't work, she attempted to turn Madeline against me again, promising her daughter that they could still salvage the situation if they stood together. Watching Madeline firmly reject her mother's manipulations was one of the most powerful moments of this entire ordeal. The family home, which had once felt like a battleground, became a sanctuary of sorts. Lisa moved out to a small apartment in Beaverton, leaving Madeline and me to sort through years of memories and lies. We spent evenings going through old photos and documents, piecing together the real history of our blended family. Sometimes, we would find evidence of Lisa's manipulations, altered dates on documents, missing photographs mysteriously reappearing in hidden places, but these discoveries no longer held the same power to hurt us. The legal proceedings dragged on for several months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Lisa's attempts to manipulate the adoption records were deemed fraudulent, and both my and Madeline's legal status as Dad's daughters was firmly established. The court not only upheld Dad's will but also ordered Lisa to repay all the money she had secretly taken from the company accounts over the years. What surprised everyone, except perhaps Dad if he were still here to see it, was how Madeline and I handled the aftermath. Instead of letting Lisa's betrayal drive us further apart, we decided to honor Dad's legacy by working together. I took on the role of CEO as Dad had planned, while Madeline, who had a degree in marketing that she'd never had the confidence to use, took charge of our company's public relations and marketing department. Her fresh perspective and creative ideas brought new energy to the business. We sold the Victorian house, neither of us wanted to live with those memories, and split the proceeds according to Dad's will. Madeline bought a cozy Craftsman in the Hawthorne district, while I found a modern loft closer to the company offices. Every Sunday, we meet for breakfast at Dad's favorite diner, continuing his tradition but making it our own. Sometimes we talk business, sometimes we share memories of Dad, and sometimes we just enjoy being the sisters we should have been all along. Lisa made one final attempt to insert herself back into our lives about 6 months after everything was settled. She showed up at the company office unannounced, looking much older than her years, claiming she wanted to apologize and make amends. But her words rang hollow, especially when she casually mentioned that she was writing a book about her side of the story. Madeline and I stood together as we asked her to leave, and this time, there was no manipulation or guilt that could shake our united front. It's been a year since everything happened, and life has taken unexpected turns that I think would make Dad proud. The company has grown beyond our expectations, with Madeline's marketing strategies bringing in a wave of new clients across the Pacific Northwest. We've even opened a second office in Seattle, expanding Dad's dream beyond what he might have imagined. Last month, While organizing old files in Dad's former office, I found another letter he had hidden away. This one was different. Not a strategic document or legal protection, but a simple message telling me how proud he was of the woman I was becoming. He wrote about watching me grow up, about his hopes for my future, and most surprisingly, about his belief that someday Madeline and I would find our way to being true sisters. It was dated just a week before his heart attack, almost as if he knew his time was running short. The most healing moment came when Madeline and I visited Dad's grave on the anniversary of his passing. We brought his favorite Trailblazers cap and a photo of us together at the company's latest project inauguration. As we stood there, Madeline confessed that she had always been jealous of my relationship with Dad, not understanding that his heart was big enough for both of us. Lisa had spent years nurturing the jealousy, using it to keep us apart, but Dad had seen through it all and never stopped hoping we would find our way to each other. Lisa still lives in Beaverton, apparently working on her memoir that no publisher seems interested in. We hear about her occasionally through mutual acquaintances. She's tried to join several country clubs, but her reputation always precedes her. Sometimes she still sends holiday cards, which go straight into the shredder. Her attempts to maintain any connection to the wealth and status she once enjoyed have fallen flat, and there's a certain poetic justice in that. Tomorrow morning, Madeline and I will meet for our usual Sunday breakfast at Dad's diner. We'll sit in his favorite booth, order his usual blueberry pancakes with extra butter, and continue building the kind of family he always wanted for us. The waitress there, who knew Dad for years, says she can see him in both of us now, in my determination and in Madeline's newfound confidence. The inheritance that Lisa tried to steal turned out to be so much more than money or company shares. It was the chance to discover the sister I never knew I had, to understand the depth of my father's love and foresight, and to learn that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about the connections we choose to nurture and protect. Dad knew that all along, and in the end, his greatest legacy wasn't the company he built, but the bond he believed his daughters would eventually find.